Hi everyone, I'm Krista Seiden, Analytics Advocate at Google, and today I'm joined by Dan Stone, who is a Product Manager on Google Analytics 360. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Krista.
So today is a very special YouTube Live session because we're actually going to give you a preview of a new feature that hasn't quite launched yet. It's in whitelist. It should be available early next year sometime, and that is audiences in reporting. So let's take a quick look at the agenda before we jump in. So first, we're going to give you an overview of what audiences in reporting is. Then Dan's going to walk us through product demos and example audiences. And finally, we'll finish with Q&A. So on the note of Q&A, as always, please go ahead and submit your questions. The link is on the slide in front of you. It's also in the description of the YouTube Live session that you're tuned into. And there's also a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen where you can go ahead and leave your questions as we go through the presentation, and we will answer those at the end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dan, and we'll jump right in.
Awesome. Let's do it. So as the product manager on remarketing and segmentation in analytics, I spend a lot of the time in the tools and doing segmentation. And as many of you out there have probably run into before, many of you might be aware that some of the audience features in analytics are a little bit limited. And specifically, there are a couple of challenges that we run into today, where for those of you who use remarketing audiences in analytics, these audiences can be sort of published externally, but are not easily measured in the analytics product. The second limitation today is that segments are kind of applied ad hoc and are limited by the reporting date range up to 93 days and often cause sampling. And the third is that even when we are using segments kind of at their max, Google Analytics doesn't really do a great job of maintaining the user's state by default without using sort of custom implementations with dimensions.
But you do love segments, Dan. Actually, Dan joined us about a year ago now for an HOA last December called Segmenting Like a Boss. If you haven't seen that one, I highly recommend you go ahead and check that video out. Dan walks through segments in a way that I have never seen and shows you some amazing tips for getting the most out of segmentation. But today we're going to talk about audiences, actually, and the difference between segments and audiences.
Which is a great question. In fact, that's the first question that we wanted to address. So we're in the process of introducing a new concept into analytics. As Krista mentioned, we're still in beta stages with it, so the naming might change a little bit. At the end, we're going to have a sign-up link to get into the whitelist, and if anyone responds with some suggestions on how you would use this or how you would name it, we'll give you priority when we're adding people.
There you go. Definitely sign up for that whitelist and suggest some naming suggestions.
So the first question is, how are audiences different from segments? For those of you who are expert segment users, all of the stuff on the left is probably very familiar to you. Segments are basically like a set of rules that are applied on the fly in a report. They are tied to the particular reporting date range, kind of like applying a filter. They can be based on users, hits, or sessions. They are mainly for exploration and comparison, and they are often sampled. And for example, what you're doing with the segment is you're asking, show me people or show me sessions where X happened during this report's date range. Now, an audience you can think about as if it's a permanent or materialized segment. And this is what enables us to have lifetime memberships that are not at all tied to the reporting date range. They are aggregated in analytics reporting from the date that you create the audience. And they're always a set of users, which you can imagine as a set of cookies or user IDs. And they can not only be measured, but also targeted and acted on. And they are mostly unsampled. So an example is people who ever did some action, regardless of whether it happened in the reporting date range. So with that, I think one of the best ways to show you is actually to dive into the product. So I'm going to now switch over to the product and show you what this is looking like right now. All right, so starting out on the left, if you take a look at the left nav, we have a new report that is right now called Audiences in the Audience section. And if you drill into this, you will see all of the audiences that you have created. So I'm going to scroll down, and we can now see all of the audiences that our team has created in the Google Analytics Merchandise Store account. Should I zoom in on this?
Sure.
It's a little bit hard to read. So we have a couple audiences here called current shoppers, past purchasers, revenue greater than 100. And from this report, you can click into one of these audiences and actually drill down on it. Since this is a beta feature, there's like a 50% chance that the feature will break while we're demoing it.
Great at the demo, guys.
And now I have this audience selected, current shoppers, and I can start seeing how it overlaps with the Google demographics and interest categories, like interest categories or age, gender, acquisition channel breakdowns, etc. But this isn't the only thing that I can do with audiences either. Part of the purpose of putting them in reporting at all is so that you can access this in your existing reports.
Right, so as like a secondary dimension or a segment or something like that.
Exactly. So we now have the ability to access this audience dimension through segments and through a couple other ways in the product where I can just type in audience contains, and now this shows me all of the audiences that I have populated. So imagine this is like a new dimension that you get access to, that you've custom created. And I can now apply this to any report, just like a normal segment. So these are the two ways of using this data in the reporting. And you can see I've now applied this to my language report. You can also get pretty complex and combine audiences with other conditions in a segment using all of the segment tips and tricks that we've showed before. You can even create audiences out of other audiences and create audiences using multiple audiences. So this gets really powerful.
That sounds very meta.
So I've just showed you what you do once you have the audiences already built. And the last part of the demo is where I'm going to show you how to actually build these in the first place. So if we go to admin, this is the same place where we're building remarketing audiences today. So in admin, under audience definitions, we have this audiences tab. And just one thing to point out, this flow that I'm showing you right now is what exists in the current product. But we are also at the same time building a new flow to roll out along with this feature that will allow you to use the same audience definition in multiple places. So for those of you who are using Optimize 360, you might have found that you essentially have to create an audience for Optimize and another one for AdWords or wherever you want those audiences, and we're going to change that with this launch that's also coming out at the same time.
Awesome. So they'll be able to create one audience and use it in multiple destinations.
Yes.
Great. That'll save a lot of time, I'm sure.
And that's also one of the reasons why we're building this feature in the first place, because we're pushing audiences to all these places today, but we want reporting back on them. So you'll see in this dropdown, this has all of my normal destinations, like AdWords for remarketing. I have my MCC in here for publishing to multiple AdWords accounts. I have my DBM and DFP accounts linked. If you have those accessed, they'll also be in here. Google Optimize is a destination, and this is a brand new destination, which is called Google Analytics. And the reason why we have this at all is because these are essentially materialized for you based on your own configurations, and so there will be some limits to these audiences. By default, we're starting with 20 audiences for standard customers and 200 audiences for 360 customers, just like custom dimensions. It's a separate limit, so you don't have to worry about this impacting the number of custom dimensions or metrics you can set up.
Right. So you also mentioned that once you create an audience, that data is then starting to collect, right? So
yes.
Make sure that you create these early on so that you can start to use that data later on in those reports, that secondary dimension, those segments.
That's right. We are looking at some options to help backfill these because we realize that that is a little bit of a hurdle to get set up, sort of like we do with remarketing. But one of the ways that we're able to provide this in an unsampled way and pre-aggregated way going forward is that we are at some point in time saying we are going to start processing this going forward.
Makes total sense.
All right, and then here I can choose any of the definitions that I can use for remarketing today. So I'll choose returning users. And once I hit save, this is going to start populating this audience in reporting. So that's a real quick overview of how to get started with audiences and reporting in the product. Switching back, we were going to go over a couple of the common use cases that we've seen that we wanted to build this product to help support.
Awesome.
And as we go in, these are only a couple examples. We're just beginning to scratch the surface of everything that you can do with this feature. So again, as you are signing up, if you want to say what you would use audiences for your own business, we'd love to hear from you. All right, so a couple common use cases sort of cluster around three categories. And many of these use cases are common across many different verticals. So thinking about the left-hand side, an e-commerce company, where we have a lot of online purchasers. A really common use case is to say, I want to know who are the people that have subscribed to my email list ever, who visited my site in the last month. So one challenge with segmentation today is that it's really hard to track users who are visiting my site who might already be signed up for my email list. Because these may be very different from my average, say, second-time returning user. If I'm doing remarketing, it's capturing all of these people and treating them sort of the exact same way.
Right.
And on the other hand, there are a number of people who have, say, event action email sign-up, but this is only happening in this last month.
Right, so it might fall outside of the timeline that you're looking in a current segment.
Exactly. So the way I would do this is I would go into the product and I would create an audience for customers who have signed up and basically set the membership duration to control how long these users stay in my list. So I would click Create New, and let's say I'm using an event for this. So I'll say event action contains email sign up. Click Apply. And then call this email subscribers. Make sure that I set the membership duration to be 540 days, which is essentially the max. And we're changing this UI a little bit so that it's going to be even easier to say, once a user is added, make them permanently a member of this audience. And then save. And now going forward, everyone where the event action contains email sign up will start showing up as assigned to this audience as if you had set a custom dimension saying add these users to the email subscribers custom dimension.
Nice.
All right, let's take another example. So in addition to being able to do definitions like ever did some action, there are a number of use cases where we want to know how many users right now are in the checkout phase of the purchase process, but have not yet checked out. And today, it is sort of possible to do with segments in some cases, but if we want to then go target them, there are some weird like negative use cases. We have to create multiple audiences to do it. For those of you who might not be aware, we launched earlier this year a feature we called state-based audiences, which allows you to remove users from audiences when they meet some condition. So we can actually create an audience of current shoppers, and we have. I'll show you the definition. And it allows you to say users who have viewed a product but have not yet purchased. And so what it looks like here is it's basically sessions where the product list views or product detail views greater than 0 and exclude transactions greater than 0. And what this means is that if this user visits and views a product and doesn't purchase, they'll be assigned to this audience. If they come back to the site and don't do anything, they'll still be assigned to this audience. So you don't have to worry about like using user segments and figuring out how to make sure you exclude the right things. They're just going to be in current shoppers until they purchase.
So that gives you much more flexibility in your analysis to really understand what else those users might be doing on your website besides checking out. You can take that one step farther to then try to target something to them, some kind of an offer where you know they are, what else they might be interested in.
Exactly, yeah. So this opens up all kinds of uses for targeting, even improving your measurement. There are a lot of use cases that right now are not easy to do. And with audiences, once you've created these audiences, you can then overlay them with others or with other reports. So you can say how many of my maybe incoming display traffic users are current shoppers already versus are net new customers. So going back, we'll go through the last type of use case, which is one of the most complex, but also one of the most powerful when done right. So many of us have challenges where we want to know how do users migrate from one state to the other. And with segments today, we have sequence support, and this can be done, but for things that happen over a long period of time, it becomes really challenging to measure it.
Yep, definitely. You know, people can do things over really long buying cycles if certain kind of businesses really vary in how long those buying cycles are, right? An e-commerce site might be relatively quick, but if you're trying to buy a car online, that might be a very long buying cycle. And so I can see how this would be useful there.
Yeah, exactly. So as some examples, we can now build audiences for customers who had revenue greater than 100 in the past and are current shoppers. And to do that, we can build an audience or a segment using both of these audiences. So I can say audience contains revenue greater than 100 and audience contains current shoppers.
So now these are your high-value current shoppers.
Exactly. So these are customers who have spent over $100 on the store in the past, and right now are browsing and have not yet purchased. So if there's anyone that I want to act on, it is these users.
Nice.
So those are a couple of the examples that we wanted to go through that you can do with this new feature. We're super excited about it. It's still in early phases, but was just really excited to share this with you as a sneak peek.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. So you showed us how you can use now audiences and reporting. You compare that audience data along with our Google data, such as age and demographics and interest. You can use those audiences as part of a segment or a secondary dimension. You can get very meta and add multiple audiences to make another audience. Very, very cool. So we had a nice introduction and overview of what audiences and reporting is, a great product demo and some example audiences. And now we're going to go ahead and take your questions. Before we get to questions, though, I just want to go ahead and leave you with a few resources. So as promised, we have a link, a sign-up link for our whitelist for audiences and reporting. Dan, do you have any more information you want to share about that?
I think are going to try to update that later today to give you a little comment box where you can put in your use cases.
Perfect. So go ahead and sign up there, maybe later today, so Dan can add that comment box to be whitelisted for audiences and reporting sometime in the near future. We also have a link to our GA360 Help Center, support.google.com/analytics, our Analytics Academy, www.analyticsacademy.withgoogle.com to learn about Google Analytics. And finally, you can always reach us on social at Google Analytics. I'm at Krista Seiden. So with that, we'll go ahead and start to take your Q&A. Be sure to get it in to either the Q&A box or the form. So our first question is from Charles, and Charles wants to know, are there any plans to make these audiences pre-populated?
It's a good question. So I think I mentioned in the demo backfill, pre-population, same thing. We are looking into backfilling or pre-populating. We don't have concrete plans yet on what exactly that'll look like, but we know this is a pain point, and so we're looking to solve it in the future.
Awesome. We have a question in the form from Jose, who wants to know, will it work with multi-channel or attribution modeling? I'm not sure if that's exactly related, but maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, so one way of looking at that could be to ask whether this is going to be surfaced in the multi-channel funnels section of Google Analytics. Initially, it is not in the multi-channel funnels section. We are looking at adding it as another dimension that you could reference using a conversion segment.
Cool. All right, so that is actually all the questions we have. But Dan, I wanted to maybe give you one last opportunity. Are there any really cool things that you anticipate doing with this? Like, what is the one thing that you're most excited about in terms of using audiences in reporting?
I think for me, as a former marketer, I'm really excited about using audiences in reporting to better meet our customers where they are. So this is going to not only provide us more capabilities in measurement, but then when we start using these definitions for targeting on Optimize or through RLSA or remarketing on display, this is going to enable us to be much more precise about who we are reaching. And that is what makes me the most excited.
That is very exciting. I do have one more question that has just come in for you. Charles also wants to know, will these be available in BigQuery export?
Yes. Initially, during the whitelist, we are not going to export through BigQuery or the GA API. But once these get sort of finalized, we do anticipate exporting these through both of those channels.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this is a really exciting preview of something that's coming. I know I'm excited about it and to really start to use it. And the use cases that you laid out, I think, are very relevant to our users. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.